"Get up, this table is for family," my son told me. Those words pierced my chest like icy daggers. I didn't know at that moment that my life would change forever. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I would. And if you, for a single second, feel like this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me keep letting this off my chest. It was a Saturday night in New York City, and the restaurant, the Old Homestead Steakhouse, was glowing with its golden lights. I had reserved the main table, the one next to the window overlooking the low street, where young couples walk by laughing and tourists take pictures. I was wearing my navy blue silk dress, the same one I wore when Robert graduated from college. I had gotten my hair done at the salon that afternoon and even put a little rouge on my cheeks. At 72 years old, I still thought I could look nice for my children. The occasion was special. It was the 45th birthday of Robert, my oldest son. I had worked 40 years as an accountant at a textile company. I had saved every dollar. I had invested in some stocks that gave me good returns. I had a small fortune built up through effort, and I thought it was the perfect time to celebrate with family. How foolish I was. They arrived late, as always. Robert walked in first, in his dark gray suit and that serious expression he had inherited from his father. Behind him came Jennifer, his wife, a blonde woman with a perfect smile who always greeted me with 2 kisses as cold as marble. They were followed by my 2 grandchildren, Alex, who was 14, and little Sophia, just 8. Finally, my youngest son, David, with his flavor-of-the-month girlfriend, a girl who couldn't have been more than 25. I immediately stood up, my heart pounding hard. I had been waiting for them for half an hour, nervous, checking my reflection in the window glass, mentally rehearsing the congratulatory words I wanted to tell Robert. I opened my arms, ready to embrace him, to whisper, "Happy birthday, my love," like I did when he was little and would run to me after school. But Robert didn't even look at me. His eyes scanned the restaurant, observing the occupied tables, the decor, as if he were an inspector evaluating the place. Then, without addressing me, he said something quietly to Jennifer. She nodded and approached the table where I was still standing, smiling like an idiot. "Martha, we're so sorry," Jennifer said with that syrupy voice she used when she wanted something. "But we invited my parents, too. We didn't realize you had reserved a table so small." I looked at the table. It was for 8 people. We were 7. "No problem, dear," I said, feeling confused. "We can ask for another chair." Robert approached then, and with that cold voice he had perfected over the years, he uttered the words that would shatter me. "Get up, Mom. This table is for family." The noise of the restaurant faded away. The conversations, the laughter, the clinking of glasses. Everything became silent. I felt as if someone had emptied my lungs of air. "I beg your pardon?" I asked, thinking I had misheard. "Jennifer's parents are going to arrive any minute," he explained, with the patience of someone talking to a small child. "We need the whole table. You can sit at the bar, or better yet, we can have dinner another day." Jennifer looked down. David checked his phone as if nothing was happening. My grandchildren looked at me with confused expressions, but no one said anything. No one. I remained there, clutching my purse with trembling hands, feeling the humiliation course through me from head to toe. The waiter, an older gentleman with a gray mustache, approached, looking concerned. "Everything all right over here?" he asked, noticing the obvious tension at the table. "Perfectly fine," I replied, with a smile that hurt me to the bone. "Just a little family misunderstanding." Robert was already taking my coat off the chair, carefully folding it and handing it to me as if it were an office briefcase. His movements were precise, calculated, without a hint of shame or doubt. "Mom, don't take it the wrong way," he added, as if that would soften the stab. "It's just that, you know how these things are. The in-laws, family politics. It's better this way." I took my coat without saying a word. My fingers, adorned with the rings I had bought with my own money, trembled as I hung it on my arm. I had spent $300 on this dinner. I had reserved it 2 weeks in advance. I had bought an expensive gift that was now resting wrapped in my purse. I turned to leave, but before taking the first step, I looked at my grandchildren. Alex had moist eyes, and little Sophia reached out her hand to me. "Grandma, are you leaving?" she asked with that innocence only children have. Robert gently pulled her towards him. "Grandma has things to do, sweetie. We'll see her another day." I walked toward the exit with my head held high, feeling all the eyes in the restaurant fixed on my back. At the door, the maitre d' stopped me. "Ma'am, everything is in order with your reservation." I smiled, although I felt like my soul was splitting in two. "Perfectly fine, young man." In the end, the table wasn't for me. I stepped out onto the low street. The lights of New York shone as always, but I felt invisible, as if I had ceased to exist the moment my son uttered those terrible words. I walked slowly toward the subway, feeling the chill of October penetrate my bones. That night, in my empty house in the Upper East Side neighborhood, I placed 2 glasses on the dining room table, one for me, the other for my loneliness. And as I drank my wine in silence, a horrible question began to form in my mind. How long had I been a stranger in my own family? The following week passed in a deafening silence. No call, no message, not even a, "Did you get home okay?" after that humiliation at the restaurant. I kept waiting, staring at the phone every morning as I drank my coffee, wondering if Robert would at least feel a little guilt for what he had done. But no. The silence spread like an oil slick, filling every corner of my apartment on Fifth Avenue. The walls seemed to mock me with all those family photographs. Robert receiving his college diploma, which I paid for by working double shifts. David at his previous wedding, where I was the one who covered all the reception expenses. My grandchildren at their birthdays, celebrations that I always organized and financed. On Tuesday morning, while reviewing my bank statements, I realized something that chilled my blood. Over the past 3 years, I had transferred more than $40,000 to Robert. $40,000, a fortune for any retiree. I remembered every one of those transfers. The down payment for their second house in the suburbs of New Jersey, my grandchildren's private schools, Jennifer's new car, the family vacations in Miami, where I was never invited but always helped pay for. "It's just temporary, Mom," he would always tell me. "When Jennifer's company takes off, we'll pay you back everything with interest." Jennifer's company, a decorating business that had been about to take off for 5 years, but had only lifted my money out of my bank account. On Thursday, I received an unexpected visit. Jennifer showed up at my door with a box of pastries from Magnolia Bakery and that smile she had perfected for awkward occasions. She was wearing a camel coat that cost more than my monthly pension, and her perfectly manicured nails gleamed under the hallway light. "Dearest mother-in-law," she said, kissing my cheeks with the same affection one gives to an old piece of furniture. "How are you? I brought these sweets to have with coffee." I invited her in, although something in my stomach was twisting. Jennifer never came without a reason, and those reasons always ended up costing me money or tears. We sat in my living room, where my collection of Dresden china shone in the display cabinets, pieces I had bought with my first savings, when I still believed that someday I would have a house full of family on Sundays. Jennifer looked at the figurines with the expression she used when evaluating the value of things. "Martha, I've come to talk to you about what happened on Saturday," she said, stirring her coffee with delicate movements. "Robert is, well, he's very embarrassed. He didn't mean to hurt you. It was just an uncomfortable situation. You know how men are with these things." "Uncomfortable?" I asked, feeling the word scratch my throat. "Is it uncomfortable to have a mother?" Jennifer looked down, but only for a second. She had learned to recover quickly from difficult questions. "Don't say that, please. It's just that my parents are very traditional. They like to have a certain control over family situations. And well, you know how Robert is. Always wanting to impress everyone." Ah, yes, Robert and his need to impress. I remembered when he was 25 and I worked weekends so he could buy his first designer suit. "For job interviews, Mom, image is important." Now, 40 years later, his image was still more important than his mother. "I understand," I said, although I understood nothing. I suppose at my age I should be used to being invisible. "Don't be dramatic, Martha. You know we all love you very much." "It's just that—" Jennifer paused, as if searching for the exact words. "Sometimes you feel like you need too much attention. And we have our own lives, our commitments. Too much attention." The phrase ran through me like an arrow. Was it asking for too much attention to want to have dinner with my family on my son's birthday? Was it excessive to expect a seat at the table that I had paid for? "You're right," I replied, and I saw Jennifer relax, believing she had solved the problem. "Maybe I've been asking for too much." Jennifer smiled, that victorious smile that appeared when she got what she wanted. "I'm glad you understand. Robert will be so relieved. Oh, and speaking of Robert, I wanted to ask you something. Do you remember those shares you have in the textile company where you used to work? The ones that gave you good dividends last year?" There it was, the real reason for her visit, as always. "What about them?" I asked, although I already knew where the conversation was going. "Well, Robert has been thinking. With the economic situation as it is, maybe it would be smart to diversify your investments. He knows an excellent financial advisor who could help you move that capital into something safer, Bitcoin, for example, or some more modern investment fund." Bitcoin, the magic word of the last few years. Everyone talked about cryptocurrencies as if they were the solution to all economic problems. But I knew Robert didn't understand Bitcoins or investment funds. What he understood was how to access my money. "Those shares have given me security for years," I said calmly. "The dividends help supplement my pension." "Yes, but think about it, Martha. With a good investment, you could triple those returns. And if something happened to you, well, it would be much easier for us to handle liquid assets than shares in a textile company." If something happened to me, she was already planning my death, calculating how it would be most convenient to inherit my assets. I stared at her. This woman who had entered my family as a sweet daughter-in-law and was now talking about my assets as if they were already hers by right. "I'll tell Robert I'll think about it," I lied. Jennifer stood up, satisfied with her work. She kissed my cheeks again, and as she headed toward the door, she stopped next to my china cabinet. "By the way, Martha, these pieces are gorgeous, very valuable, I imagine. You should think about protecting them better. You know, making an inventory for insurance, just in case." After she left, I remained sitting in my living room, surrounded by all the objects I had collected during a lifetime of work. Each piece had a story, a memory, a moment when I believed I was building something for my family. Now I realized that for them, I was just a temporary administrator of assets they considered theirs by right. That night, I took out my oldest photo album. Pages and pages of memories. Robert taking his first steps, David learning to ride a bike, birthdays, Christmases, graduations. In all the photos I was there, smiling, hugging them, being their mother. But as I turned the pages, a terrible question began to form in my mind. At what point did I stop being their mother and become their ATM? I closed the album and put it away in the drawer. For the first time in 72 years, I wondered if it was possible for a mother to divorce her children. The days began to pass like ghosts. It was October in New York, and from my window, I watched the leaves in Central Park change color while I remained motionless in my routine of solitude. I woke up every morning at 7, made my black coffee, read the newspaper, and waited. I waited for a call that never came, a message that never appeared, an apology that vanished like smoke. On Friday, I decided to do something I hadn't done in months. Go for a walk in the neighborhood without a fixed destination. I needed air. I needed to see people. I needed to remember that a world existed beyond my silent apartment. I walked down Madison Avenue, looking at the shop windows where I used to buy gifts for my grandchildren, where I chose those expensive dresses I wore for family celebrations that felt increasingly foreign to me. That's when I saw them. They were leaving Saks Fifth Avenue with bags in their hands, laughing. Robert, Jennifer, and my 2 grandchildren loaded with packages. Jennifer was wearing a new coat, one of those designer ones that cost more than $1,000. Alex had sneakers that shone as if they were gold, and little Sophia was hugging a huge doll, one of those that cost a fortune at luxury toy stores. My first instinct was to approach them, say hello, ask how they were, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the way they laughed, so free, so happy, as if nothing had happened, as if I didn't exist, as if the humiliation at the restaurant had only been a bad dream they had already forgotten. I hid behind a column, feeling ridiculous but unable to move. I watched them from a distance, studying my own family as if they were strangers. Robert whispered something to Jennifer, and she burst into laughter. My grandchildren ran ahead, playing, happy, a perfect family. A family without me. Then I understood. They didn't miss me. They didn't need to apologize because simply, they didn't miss me. I was the old piece of furniture that had become inconvenient, the chair that no longer matched the new decor of their lives. I returned home with a heart heavy as lead, and bitter surprise awaited me in the mailbox, a letter from my bank. As I opened it, my hands trembled. It was a notification about a transaction in my savings account. Robert had used the secondary card I had given him years ago for emergencies. He had withdrawn $5,000. $5,000, without consulting me, without notifying me, as if it were his money. I immediately called the bank, my hands shaking as I dialed each number. "Good morning, Ms. Miller," the employee said with a kind voice. "How can I help you? I want to know about a withdrawal in my account, $5,000 that was withdrawn yesterday." "One moment, please. Yes, I see it here. The withdrawal was made by Mr. Robert Miller with the secondary card you authorized. Is there a problem?" Problem. What a small word to describe what I was feeling. "I want to cancel that secondary card immediately," I said, surprised by the firmness in my own voice. "Of course, ma'am. Any specific reason?" "Yes," I replied. "It's no longer a family emergency, it's a family robbery." That afternoon, after canceling the card, I sat in my living room and did something I hadn't done in years. A list of all the money I had given my children in the last 5 years. Every transfer, every loan, every temporary help that had never been repaid. Robert, $42,000. David, $25,000. Gifts for the grandchildren, $8,000. Family vacations I financed but was not invited to, $12,000. $87,000. A fortune. Money I had saved working extra shifts, investing carefully in the stock market, buying some gold when things got tough. My life savings evaporating into the hands of children who treated me like a walking bank account. The phone rang while I was adding the numbers for the 3rd time, hoping the math was lying. It was David. "Mom, how are you?" he asked with that casual voice he used when he wanted something. "Fine, son. Surprised, but fine." "Surprised? Why?" "By finding out I have millionaire children," I said, unable to contain the irony. "At least millionaires with my money." There was an awkward silence on the other end of the line. "Mom, I don't understand. David, when was the last time you called me without needing money?" Another silence. Longer this time. "It's not fair for you to say that. I call you because you care about me." "Care about me?" I repeated. "You know what? You're right. I am unfair. You also call me when you need me to babysit your brother's children so he and Jennifer can go away for the weekend. Or when you need a free sitter for your date this week." "Mom, you're being very harsh." "No, David. Harsh is discovering that your own children see you as an ATM that also does household chores." I hung up the phone. It was the first time in my life I had hung up on one of my children, and the feeling was strange, liberating, and terrifying all at once. That night I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, remembering. I remembered when Robert was 8 and got pneumonia. I spent 3 nights awake taking care of him, taking him to the hospital, holding his hand while the doctors put him on IVs. I remembered when David broke his arm at 10, and how I worked double shifts for a month to pay for the private orthopedic surgeon because the public one had a long waiting list. I had loved them with every fiber of my being. I had put them above everything. My dreams, my comfort, my money, my time. And now, after 40 years of being their mother, I had been reduced to this, a resource that no longer even deserved a seat at their table. At Luke 3 sang, I made a decision. I got up, went to my desk, and took out paper and pen. It was not the time for computers or phones. It was time for handwritten words. With the ink of dignity I had left, I wrote 2 letters, one for Robert, the other for David. In both, the same words. Son, I have decided to take a vacation from being your mother. Don't look for me until you remember that I am a person, not a bank account. When you learn the difference between loving and using, maybe we can talk. Until then, learn to live without my money. Maybe then you will remember that you also lived without my love. I put them in envelopes, but I didn't send them that night. First, I had to do something more important. I had to learn to be Martha Miller again, not just Robert and David's mother. At dawn, for the first time in months, I looked in the mirror and liked what I saw, a 72-year-old woman who was about to discover what it meant to live for herself. On Monday morning, armed with the 2 letters I had written, I decided to deliver them in person. I didn't want the cowardly refuge of mail or text messages. If I was going to declare my emotional independence, I would do it while looking them in the eye. First, I went to David's apartment in Greenwich Village. He lived in a modern penthouse that I had helped furnish when he separated from his ex-wife. I climbed the 3 flights of stairs, feeling my breathing accelerate, not from physical effort, but from the adrenaline of what I was about to do. I rang the doorbell. I heard steps, voices, movement. When he opened the door, his hair was messy, and he looked like he hadn't slept much. Behind him appeared the blonde girl who had been with him at the restaurant, wrapped in a silk robe that I immediately recognized. It was the one I had given her for her birthday last year. "Mom," he said, surprised. "What are you doing here so early?" "Good morning, David," I replied, with a calm that surprised me. "I've come to give you something." I extended the letter to him. He took it suspiciously, as if it were a medical bill. "What is this?" "It's my resignation," I said simply. "As of today, I am no longer your full-time mother. I only work part-time, and only when mutual respect is involved." The blonde girl discreetly disappeared into the apartment, but I am sure she kept listening from the kitchen. "Mom, I don't understand. Are you okay? Do you feel sick?" "For the first time in years, I feel perfectly sane," I replied. "Read it when you have time, between one date and another, and when you finish reading it, ask yourself, when was the last time you asked me how I was, not how much money I could give you?" I turned and began to walk toward the stairs. Behind me, I heard his voice. "Mom, wait! What are you talking about?" But I didn't stop. For the first time in my life, I didn't stop when one of my children called out to me. The second stop was more complicated. Robert lived in Scottsdale, in a townhouse that had a small but well-kept yard. A house I had helped buy, of course. The trip by light rail and bus took me an hour. I used the time to observe the people around me, young mothers with their babies, elderly people traveling alone, workers heading to their jobs. Everyone seemed to have a purpose, a destination. I had one too. I was going to set myself free. When I arrived, Jennifer was watering the plants in the front yard. She was wearing a pink jogging suit that looked like it was straight out of a magazine, and her perfect nails gleamed even under the morning October light. When she saw me, her smile froze for a microsecond before she recovered her perfect daughter-in-law expression. "Martha, what a surprise to see you here. Everything okay?" "Everything is perfect, Jennifer. Is Robert here?" "Yes, he's having breakfast. Do you want to come in? I just made coffee." "No, thank you. I'm just here to drop this off." I took the second letter out of my purse. Jennifer looked at it as if it were a bomb. "A letter? For Robert? Why don't you just call him?" "Because some important things need to be written, not talked about," I replied. "Tell him it's not urgent, that he can read it when he finishes spending the $5,000 he took from my account without telling me." The color drained from Jennifer's face like water down a sink. "Martha, I didn't know anything about that. Robert didn't tell me." "Of course he didn't tell you. Stealing from your own mother is not something you share even with your wife," I interrupted her. "But don't worry, Jennifer. I already changed the bank passwords. From now on, if Robert needs my money, he'll have to ask me for it like any polite person would ask another for a favor." At that moment, Robert appeared in the doorway. He was wearing a navy blue suit and a tie I had given him for Father's Day. He looked successful, prosperous, like the son any mother would be proud to have. Except I no longer knew if I was proud or just tired. "Mom, what are you doing here? Jennifer says you brought a letter." "That's right," I replied, walking toward him. "A temporary goodbye letter." "Goodbye? Are you going on a trip? Without telling us?" The irony of the question hit me like a slap. How many times had they made plans, trips, celebrations without telling me, without including me, without even considering that I might want to participate? I'm not going on a trip, Robert. I'm leaving this sick dynamic where I give everything and you take everything, where I am always available, but you never have time for me. Robert looked at Jennifer for an explanation, as if she could translate the words of a mother who had finally decided to speak clearly. Mom, if this is about the restaurant— It's not just about the restaurant, I interrupted him. It's about the $5,000 you took without asking. It's about the $42,000 I've given you in 3 years without you ever thinking of paying me back even $100. It's about calling me only when you need something. It's about treating me like an employee instead of your mother. But Mom, we've always known we could count on you. And you always have been able to. The problem is that I have never been able to count on you. I handed the letter directly into his hands. His fingers, those same fingers I had bandaged when he cut himself as a child, trembled slightly as he took it. What does it say? He asked, as if he were afraid to open it. It says that from now on, if you want to have a mother, you're going to have to behave like sons. And if you can't do that, then you're going to have to learn to live without your personal ATM. I walked away slowly, feeling their gazes fixed on my back. They didn't run after me. They didn't shout for me to wait. They didn't try to explain anything. And that, more than any words, confirmed that I had made the right decision. On the bus back to New York, an older woman sitting next to me asked if I was okay. Apparently, I had tears on my cheeks without realizing it. Yes, I replied, surprised by the truth in my answer. For the first time in years, I feel perfectly fine. Are you sure? You seem to be going through a difficult time. I am going through one, but it's a necessary time. Sometimes you have to break a little to be able to rebuild better. The woman smiled with understanding. My children also gave me trouble when I decided to stop being their personal maid. But you know what? After a while, they learned to value me. Or at least, they learned to fake valuing me, which is already progress. We laughed together, and it was the first genuine laugh I had had in weeks. When I got home that afternoon, I made myself some tea and sat in my favorite armchair. The apartment felt different. Not more silent, but more peaceful, as if years of accumulated tension had been expelled, and now the air could circulate freely. The phone rang at Luke 8 Giotoi. It was Robert. Mom, I read your letter. I think you're exaggerating. We need to talk. There's nothing to talk about, Robert. There is a lot to change, but talking isn't going to be enough. But we're family, Mom. Families forgive. They support each other. You're right, I interrupted him. Families support each other mutually. When you are ready to support me as much as I have supported you, to call me to ask how I am as often as you call me to ask for money, then we can be family again. Until then, I am simply Martha Miller, and you are simply two adults who are going to have to learn to solve your financial problems without my help. I hung up the phone before he could respond, and for the first time in months, I slept through the night without waking up. The following days brought an avalanche of reactions that confirmed my worst suspicions about how my children really saw me. The phone rang constantly, but I was no longer the one who rushed to answer every call like an obedient dog. Now I let it ring, let it wear itself out, let it understand that my availability was no longer unconditional. On Wednesday afternoon, Jennifer showed up at my door without calling. This time she didn't bring pastries or diplomatic smiles. She went straight to the point, with desperation painted on her face like a badly applied mask. Martha, we have to talk. Robert is very worried about you. He says you're acting strange. Strange? I asked, inviting her in more out of curiosity than courtesy. Is it strange for a mother to decide not to continue being the personal bank of her children? Jennifer sat on the edge of the sofa, as if the apartment were enemy territory. It's not that, Martha. It's just that, well, you've always been so generous with us, so understanding. We don't understand what has changed. What has changed is that I realized my generosity had become your acquired right, I replied, serving coffee she hadn't requested. And my understanding, your excuse for never growing up. Jennifer nervously stirred her coffee, her perfect nails making little noises against the china. "Look, Martha, I know Robert took that money without telling you. It was a mistake. I admit it. But we had an emergency. The children's school raised the tuition, and we needed—" "An emergency?" I interrupted her. "Jennifer, you spent more than $2,000 on clothes last Friday. I saw you leaving Saks Fifth Avenue. Don't tell me you didn't have money for the school." She froze. She hadn't expected me to have seen her, to have been a witness to their shopping spree while robbing their mother-in-law for educational emergencies. That was different. We needed those clothes for Robert's work, to project a successful image. And my image? My dignity? Don't those matter? I asked, feeling my voice harden. Because you see, Jennifer, projecting a successful image with money stolen from your mother-in-law doesn't seem very successful to me. Jennifer looked down, but not out of shame. Instead, she was calculating. I could see the wheels turning in her head, looking for the right angle to regain control of the situation. "Martha, I understand you're upset, but think about the children. Alex and Sophia adore you. Do you really want to punish them for their parents' mistakes?" There it was, the grandchild card, the most predictable and effective emotional manipulation in the family arsenal. For years it had worked like a charm. Any complaint of mine vanished when they mentioned my grandchildren. "The children," I repeated slowly. "Do you know when was the last time my adorable grandchildren called me on their own initiative, without you forcing them to ask me for something?" Jennifer didn't answer because we both knew the answer. "Never." "Do you know how many times Alex has told me something about his life that wasn't related to a gift he wanted? How many times has Sophia made me a drawing that wasn't accompanied by a list of toys for her birthday? Martha, they're kids. It's normal because you have taught them that Grandma is a gift vending machine, not a person who loves them," I interrupted her. "You have taught them that they can love me when they need something and forget me when they don't." Jennifer stood up, and for the first time I saw something resembling real desperation in her eyes. "What do you want us to do, Martha? What do you need for things to go back to how they were before?" "That's the wrong question, Jennifer. The correct question is, what are you willing to do for things to be better than they were before?" "I don't understand the difference." "The difference is that I no longer want to go back to how things were before. Before, I gave and you took. Before, I was always available, and you only showed up when you needed me. Before, I was your mother only when it was convenient for you." She headed toward the door, but before leaving, she turned back one last time. "Martha, I hope you reconsider this. Robert is thinking of seeking professional help for you. He says maybe you need therapy." The threat hung in the air like poisonous smoke. Now it turned out that I was the crazy one. The one who needed professional help was the mother who had decided not to be exploited anymore. "Tell Robert that's an excellent idea," I replied with a smile. "I also think he needs therapy, urgently, to treat his addiction to my money." That night, David decided to change strategies. Instead of calling or coming to see me, he sent my grandchildren as emotional ambassadors. Alex and Sophia appeared at my door with Lucy, his current girlfriend, who pretended to be the cool aunt who had brought them to visit their grandmother. "Grandma!" shouted Sophia, hugging me with that enthusiasm only children can convincingly fake. "We missed you so much." Alex, already a teenager and less willing to play the charming grandchild role, stood back with his hands in his pockets. "Hi, Grandma," he mumbled, looking at his phone. "Hello, my darlings," I replied, letting them in. "What brings you here?" Lucy, who couldn't have been more than 25 and had clearly received precise instructions, smiled nervously. "The kids wanted to see you. They said it's been a while since they came." "Is that true?" I confirmed. "I think the last time was at Christmas, to pick up your gifts." Sophia sat next to me on the sofa, with that calculated proximity the adults had taught her to use. "Grandma, Dad says you're mad at us." "Did your dad tell you why I'm mad?" The girl shook her head, but Alex looked up from his phone for the first time. "He said you don't understand that families help each other." There was David's version of events. He was the misunderstood son who only needed family help, and I was the selfish mother who didn't understand the responsibilities of modern life. "And what do you think, Alex?" I asked. "Do you think families should help each other?" "I guess so," he replied without much conviction. "Perfect. Then you're going to help me with something. I want you to tell me, when was the last time your dad or your Uncle Robert asked me if I needed help with anything?" The silence that followed was deafening. Alex looked at Lucy for help, but she was as lost as he was. I don't know," he finally admitted. "Exactly. You don't know because it has never happened," I said, stroking Sophia's hair. "You see, my love, helping each other in a family means everyone helps everyone, not that one person always helps and the others just receive." Lucy tried to intervene with the clumsiness of someone who was clearly out of place. "Ms. Miller, I really think David loves you very much. It's just that sometimes men don't know how to express their feelings." 52 years haven't been enough for him to learn how to express his feelings?" I asked. "Because he is very articulate when it comes to expressing his financial needs." Alex, who had been listening with more attention than he let on, suddenly asked, "Grandma, is it true that you've given Dad and Uncle Robert a lot of money?" The directness of the question surprised me. Apparently, some of what was happening had reached his ears. "What do you think, Alex?" "I think so, because Dad always says he doesn't have money, but we always buy things. And when Mom asks him where the money comes from, he says Grandma understands family emergencies." Lucy became visibly nervous. Clearly, the plan did not include Alex being so observant or so honest. "Alex, maybe you shouldn't—" "Why not?" the boy interrupted her. "If it's true, why can't I say it?" I looked at my older grandson with new eyes. Maybe there was more hope in the next generation than I had thought. "You're right, Alex. If it's true, you should be able to say it. And yes, it's true. I have helped your father and your uncle financially for many years. And you don't want to anymore?" "It's not that I don't want to. It's that I've learned that when you help someone so much that they never learn to help themselves, you're not really helping them. You're hurting them." Alex nodded slowly, as if the explanation made sense to him. "Like when Mom always did my homework for me, and then I didn't know how to do it alone on the tests." "Exactly like that," I confirmed, smiling for the first time in days. When they left that night, Sophia hugged me for real, not with the forced acting from the beginning. And Alex, before leaving, leaned in and whispered to my ear, "Grandma, I think you did the right thing." Maybe not everything was lost after all. The weeks that followed were like living in the eye of a hurricane. While my sons panicked, trying to reorganize their lives without my financial support, I experienced something I hadn't felt in decades. Freedom. A strange freedom at first, like when you take off shoes that have been pinching you for so long that you had forgotten how it felt to walk without pain. For the first time in years, my bank account remained stable. I saw my savings grow instead of evaporating into my son's endless emergencies. My investments in the stock market began to yield better dividends because I was no longer constantly withdrawing capital. Even those small purchases of gold I had made as an economic safeguard remained intact in my safe deposit box. But financial freedom was only the beginning. The most revealing thing was discovering who I was when I wasn't defined by the needs of others. I started getting up later, not because I had to rush to solve some family problem. I ate breakfast on my terrace, reading the entire newspaper for the first time in years. Not just the financial sections I reviewed to make better decisions about my investments, which always ended up financing the dreams of others. One Tuesday morning, I decided to do something I had been putting off for years. Visit the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Not to accompany my grandchildren on an obligatory field trip, but for myself. I walked through the halls with the tranquility of someone who has all the time in the world, stopping in front of paintings I had seen in books, but never in person. It was there, in front of a Jackson Pollock painting, where I met Eleanor. She was a woman my age, elegant but unostentatious, who was explaining the details of the painting to her granddaughter with a patience I envied. The girl, about 10 years old, listened with genuine attention, asked intelligent questions, and treated her grandmother with a respect that broke my heart. "Do you see how Pollock painted not what he saw, but what he felt?" Eleanor was telling her. It was her way of saying that artists are important too, not just the critics and the big collectors. When the girl moved away to see another work, Eleanor stayed contemplating the painting with me. "Excuse me for bothering you," she said, "but I think you're crying. Are you okay?" I touched my cheeks, realizing that indeed, tears were rolling down my face. "Am I okay?" I lied automatically. "It's just that your granddaughter listens to you with such affection." Eleanor looked at me with that immediate understanding that only women who have lived long enough have. "Family problems?" she asked gently. "Does it show that much?" "Only to those of us who have gone through the same thing," she replied with a sad smile. "Would you care for a coffee? I know a quiet place near here." And that's how I ended up telling my story to a stranger in a coffee shop in Midtown. Eleanor listened without judging, without offering unsolicited advice, without minimizing my pain. When I finished talking, she poured more coffee and told me hers. "I was the perfect mother for 50 years too," she told me. "The one who always had the door open, the food ready, the money available for any crisis. My 3 sons called me when they needed something and disappeared when they got it. What happened? How did everything change? One day, my oldest son asked me to mortgage my house to help him with his business, an import company that was going to revolutionize the American market. I told him I would think about it, and that night I couldn't sleep. Not because of the money, but because I realized I didn't know my own children as adults. I only knew them as walking needs." Eleanor stirred her coffee with slow movements, as if stirring up memories. The next morning, I told all 3 of them that I was taking a 1-year sabbatical from being their mother. That if they wanted to continue having a relationship with me, they would have to build a new one, based on mutual respect and genuine affection, not on my usefulness. And did it work? With 2 of them, yes. After a few difficult months, they learned to call me to ask how I was, not what I could do for them. The third one turned out to be exactly the person I was afraid he was. He never called again. Did it not hurt you? At first it shattered me, but with time I understood that it was better to have 2 children who truly loved me than 3 who only used me. I left that coffee shop with something I hadn't had in months: hope. Eleanor had given me her phone number and had invited me to a group of women who met weekly. "It's not therapy," she clarified. "It's simply a place where mothers who have decided to retire from infinite sacrifice can talk with others who understand." That night, when I got home, I found 3 messages on the answering machine, all from Robert. His voice evolved from irritation to desperation as the messages progressed. First message: "Mom, we need to talk seriously. This situation is getting out of hand." Second message: "Mom, Jennifer is very worried. She says you're acting different, that you need help. Please call me." Third message: "Mom, please, I don't know what's going on with you, but we are your family. You can't just disconnect from us like this." I didn't call him back that night. Instead, I prepared a hot bath with scented salts, something I hadn't done since I was young and lived alone. I submerged myself in the warm water, and for the first time in months, I completely relaxed. The next day, Robert showed up at my door without calling. He no longer came with the arrogance of previous visits. He looked tired, worried, even a little scared. "Mom, please let me in. We have to resolve this." I let him in, but this time I didn't offer him coffee or sit in my usual position as attentive hostess. I remained standing, waiting for him to say what he had come to say. "Mom, I know I've made mistakes. The money thing, the restaurant, everything. But you're my mother. You can't just disappear from our lives." "I haven't disappeared, Robert. I've set boundaries. It's different." "Boundaries? Mom, we're your family. Families don't have boundaries with each other." "That is exactly the mindset that brought us here," I replied. "Healthy families do have boundaries. Boundaries on how much they can ask, how much they can take, how much they can hurt someone before that person says, 'Enough.'" Robert ran his hands through his hair, a gesture he had made since he was a child when he was frustrated. "What do you want me to do? Grovel? Apologize for what exactly?" "I don't want you to grovel, Robert. I want you to grow up. I want you to learn to be my son, not just when you need something from me. But I love you, Mom. I've always loved you. Tell me, when was the last time you showed me that love without it being accompanied by a request for money?" The silence that followed was more eloquent than any answer. Robert opened his mouth several times as if he were going to respond, but each time he fell silent. "You can't, can you?" I continued. "You can't remember a single time in the last few years when you called me just to tell me you loved me, or to ask how I was, or to tell me something that had happened to you?" "Mom, this is ridiculous. Of course It's not ridiculous, Robert. It's revealing. And the saddest thing is that you don't even realize it." Robert headed toward the door, but before leaving he turned back one last time. "Mom, I hope that when this crisis passes, we remember this conversation and can laugh at how absurd it was." "I also hope we remember this conversation, son, but I seriously doubt either of us will be laughing." That night, I attended the meeting of Eleanor's group for the first time. There were 8 women, all over 60, all with similar stories of adult children who had turned them into resources instead of mothers. I listened to stories that resonated with mine, but also stories of transformation, of women who had managed to rebuild healthier relationships with their families. For the first time in months, I didn't feel alone in my pain. At the end of the meeting, a woman named Helen approached me. "The first meeting is always the hardest," she told me. "You feel guilty for being here, as if being among us makes you a bad mother." "How did you know exactly what I was thinking?" "Because we've all thought the same thing. But let me tell you something I wish someone had told me at my first meeting. You are not a bad mother for refusing to continue being a martyr mother." I returned home that night with something I hadn't had in years: a community of women who understood my experience without judging it. For the first time, I didn't feel alone in my decision to reclaim my dignity. The months of November and December brought something I hadn't experienced in decades: silence. Not the painful silence of being ignored, but the liberating silence of not being constantly available to solve the crises of others. The holidays were approaching, and for the first time in 40 years, I wasn't planning menus, buying expensive gifts, or preparing my house to receive a family that tolerated me more than loved me. I had started attending Eleanor's group meetings religiously, and I had also started doing something revolutionary: spending my money on myself. I enrolled in art history classes at NYU, something I had wanted to do since my retirement, but always postponed due to the family emergencies that arose every month. It was a Tuesday afternoon, leaving a lecture on the Spanish Renaissance, when my phone rang. The name on the screen surprised me: Alex, my older grandson. Not his parents using his phone, but him directly. "Grandma?" His voice sounded different, more mature, less rehearsed than in his previous visits. "Hello, honey. How are you?" "Fine, I guess. Grandma, can I ask you something?" "Sure, anything you want. Is it true that Dad and Uncle Robert owe you a lot of money?" The directness of the question left me speechless for a moment. Alex had always been observant, but this suggested he had been seriously thinking about the family situation. "Why are you asking me that, Alex?" "Because last night I heard Dad talking on the phone with the bank. He was asking for a loan, and the man from the bank was asking about his income and expenses. Dad mentioned that he used to have additional family support, but not anymore." I sat on a bench in the NYU campus, needing to process not only the question, but the implication that David was having real financial problems. "Alex, does your dad know you're calling me?" "No, and I don't want him to find out, Grandma. I need to understand what's going on. Everyone at home is acting weird. Dad is stressed, Mom cries when she thinks I don't see her, and everyone acts like it's your fault, but no one explains what it is about." My grandson's honesty broke my heart. At his 14 years old, he was asking for the transparency that the adults in his family refused to give him. "Yes, honey, it's true that I've helped your dad and your uncle financially for many years. And you don't want to anymore?" "It's not that I don't want to. It's that I realized my help had become a dependency that wasn't healthy for any of us. Like when Mom gave me money to buy lunch at school but never taught me to manage my allowance. The comparison was so accurate that I was impressed. Exactly like that. What happened when your mom stopped giving you money for lunch?" At first I got really mad, but then I learned to plan better, not to spend everything on snacks the first few days, to save for the things I really wanted. Now I manage my money better than before. And do you think that did you good? Yes, even though I didn't like it at all at first. We talked for almost an hour. Alex told me things about his life that his parents had never shared with me. His problems in high school, his dreams of studying engineering, his worries about the tense atmosphere at home. It was the first real conversation I had had with one of my grandchildren in years. "Grandma, can I keep calling you? Without Dad knowing, I mean. I like talking to you when it's not about money or gifts." "Of course you can, honey. In fact, I'd love it." After hanging up, I sat on that university bench for a long time, feeling a mixture of sadness and hope. Sadness for all the time lost in superficial relationships with my grandchildren, but hope that perhaps it wasn't too late to build something real with at least one of them. The following week, Eleanor invited me to accompany her to a photography exhibition. Her granddaughter, the one I had seen at the Met, had some works exhibited in a gallery in the Soho neighborhood. It was an exhibition about inspiring women, where children and adolescents had photographed the older women in their families, accompanied by texts about why they admired them. The photograph of Eleanor was beautiful. It showed her in her garden, hands full of dirt, genuinely smiling. The accompanying text read, "My grandma Eleanor taught me that taking care of plants is like taking care of relationships. You need patience, constancy, and knowing when to give space for them to grow. But the most important thing she taught me is that a woman is never too old to stand up and say, 'This isn't right.'" "When did you tell your granddaughter about your decision to set boundaries with your sons?" I asked her as we admired her photograph. "I never told her directly, but children observe more than we think. She saw how I changed, how I stopped being constantly stressed by other people's problems, how I started dedicating time to my own interests. And did that improve your relationship with her?" "Immensely. When I stopped being the grandmother who was always solving family crises, I became the grandmother who had time and emotional energy to be truly present with her." Walking back home that night, I reflected on the difference between the two generations in my family. Alex, at his 14 years old, already showed more capacity for introspection and emotional understanding than his parents. Perhaps the lessons I had tried to teach my sons about responsibility and consequences would finally reach my grandchildren, even if it was through an indirect route. The following Sunday, while having a quiet breakfast on my terrace, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, I found Sophia, my youngest granddaughter, accompanied not by her parents, but by Alex. "Hi, Grandma," Sophia said with that genuine sweetness that only small children can project. "Alex says I can come see you if I want, not just when Dad needs something." Alex shrugged with that adolescent shyness. "I told her we had talked. I hope you don't mind. She wanted to see you." I invited them in, and for the first time in years, my grandchildren behaved like real grandchildren. Sophia showed me her drawings from school without asking for anything in return. Alex helped me water the plants on the terrace and told me about a book he was reading for literature class. "Grandma, why does Dad say you're sick?" Sophia suddenly asked, with that childlike ability to ask the hardest questions with total innocence. "That's what your dad says?" "Yes. He says you have a sickness that makes you think strange things about the family." I looked at Alex, who rolled his eyes with exasperation. I told her that was nonsense, but you know how Dad is when he can't control a situation. "Sophia, do you think I'm sick?" I asked her. The girl studied me with that seriousness that small children sometimes adopt. "No, I think you're happier than before. Before, when you came home, you always seemed tired. Now you seem, I don't know, lighter." Lighter. A perfect description of someone who had stopped carrying the emotional and financial weight of an entire family. We spent the whole afternoon together. I made them a snack. I showed them my art history books. I told them about the classes I was taking. It was the first time I felt like I was being a grandmother instead of simply a resource. When it was time to leave, Alex hugged me spontaneously. "Grandma, I like it better this way. I like getting to know you as a person, not just as, well, you know." "As what, honey?" "As the grandma who shows up when we need money for something. The brutal honesty of adolescence can be devastating and liberating at the same time. Alex had just confirmed what I had suspected. Even my grandchildren had learned to see me as a resource more than a person. "I like it better this way, too," I replied to him. "I like getting to know you when you're not acting to get something." After they left, I sat in my living room and for the first time in months, looked at the family photographs hanging on the walls without feeling pain. Instead of remembering everything I had lost, I began to imagine everything I could gain. Real relationships with my grandchildren based on genuine affection instead of financial transactions. That night, I called Eleanor. "I think I'm starting to understand," I told her. "It's not about recovering my sons. It's about discovering what remains when you remove all the layers of manipulation and dependency. And what have you discovered? That maybe I have wonderful grandchildren who were hidden behind grandchildren who had been trained to see me as a gift vending machine. That's more than many of us have managed to recover," Eleanor told me. "Perhaps the next generation will learn what ours couldn't teach." December arrived with a biting cold that sneaked through the windows of New York. But for the first time in years, I didn't feel that characteristic anxiety of the Christmas season. There were no endless lists of gifts to buy, dinners to plan, or family gatherings to organize. It was strange and liberating at the same time, like waking up one day and realizing that a wound you had carried for so long that you had forgotten what it was like to live without that pain no longer hurts. I was at Macy's buying a gift for myself, a cashmere scarf I had been admiring for weeks, when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Martha? Martha Miller?" I turned to find Helen Santos, a former co-worker from the textile company where I had spent 40 years of my life. I hadn't seen her since my retirement, almost 5 years ago. "Helen, what a surprise to see you here. Martha, you look different. Have you done something new? Change of look?" I laughed, because the question was more accurate than she imagined. "Something like that. I've made some changes in my life." Helen was one of those people who have the ability to turn a casual conversation into a complete confession. In 20 minutes, while we were having coffee in the mall's cafe, I had told her almost my entire story. "My God, Martha," she said when I finished. "I had no idea you were going through all that. You always talked about your sons with so much pride at the office." And I was proud of them, but I confused maternal pride with the obligation to be a permanent family investment fund. Helen stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "You know what strikes me about your story? That you worked with us for 40 years. You accumulated a small fortune with your smart investments. You became an economically independent woman, and yet you ended up being treated as if your only value was what you could give to others." Her words impacted me because they accurately summarized something I had felt but hadn't managed to articulate. "It's ironic, isn't it?" I continued. "I spent decades learning to value my work, to negotiate my salary, to make my colleagues respect me professionally. But at home, I accepted being treated as an unpaid employee whose only purpose was to solve other people's problems. And now what? Have you heard from them?" "Sporadically. Robert has called a few times, but always with the same attitude, as if I were the one who has to apologize for having set boundaries. David has been more direct in his resentment." "Do you regret it?" The question caught me by surprise, not because I hadn't asked it myself, but because I had never had to answer it out loud. "No," I replied with a certainty that surprised me. "It hurts, but I don't regret it. For the first time in years, I feel like Martha Miller, not Robert and David's mother." Helen smiled approvingly. "I always admired your determination at work. I'm glad to know you're finally applying it to your personal life." That conversation stayed with me for days. Helen was right. I had been strong and independent in every aspect of my life, except the one that mattered most. I had learned to negotiate with suppliers, manage budgets, make smart financial decisions, but I had accepted being emotionally manipulated by the people who claimed to love me the most. On December Bafan Num, 2 days before Christmas, Alex called me. "Grandma, are you going to be alone on Christmas Eve?" "Yes, honey." "Why?" "Because that seems terrible to me. No one should be alone on Christmas Eve." His genuine concern moved me, but it also made me reflect on something important. Alex, do you know the difference between being alone and being in loneliness? No. What is it? Being alone is when you don't have anyone nearby. Being in loneliness is when you are surrounded by people who don't truly see you. For years I spent Christmas in loneliness, surrounded by family. That sounds very sad, Grandma. It was. But this year, even though I may be alone, I won't be in loneliness because I finally have myself back. I don't quite understand what you mean, but it sounds like a good thing. It is a very good thing, honey. Grandma, can I ask you one more thing? Of course. Do you think Dad and Uncle Robert are going to change? Do you think they'll learn to, I don't know, be better sons? Alex's question was the same one that had been pursuing me for months. It was the secret hope I didn't dare admit even to myself. I don't know, Alex. I hope so, but I've learned that I can't base my happiness on the hope that others will change, and if they never change, then I will have learned a very valuable lesson, that my worth as a person doesn't depend on the ability of others to recognize it. That afternoon, I decided to do something I had been putting off. Write a letter, not for my sons, but for myself. A letter to the Martha of a year ago, the woman who had frozen in a restaurant when her son told her to get up because the table was for family. Dear Martha of the past, I wrote, I know right now you feel lost, humiliated, and completely broken. I know you believe that if you try harder, if you give more money, if you are more understanding, your sons will finally value you as you deserve. I want you to know that you are right to feel pain, but you are wrong about the solution. The problem is not that you haven't given enough. The problem is that you have given so much that you have taught others not to value what you receive. I am writing to you from the future to tell you that you survive. More than survive, you flourish. You discover that you are stronger than you thought, more interesting than you remembered, and more valuable than you had been led to believe. You will learn that real love does not require infinite sacrifice and that healthy relationships have clear boundaries. It's not going to be easy. There will be nights when you doubt yourself, days when you miss even the crumbs of affection you received in exchange for your generosity. But there will also be mornings when you wake up feeling a lightness you had forgotten existed. Your grandchildren will surprise you. Alex will turn out to be wiser and more empathetic than you imagined. Sophia will learn to love you unconditionally when there are no longer economic conditions involved. And you will discover that being a grandmother can be different and better than being a mother was. As for Robert and David, well, that story is still being written, but it is no longer the only story that matters. Now you have your own story, one that does not depend on the chapters others decide to write or not write. With love and respect for the brave woman you are about to become, Martha of the present. I put the letter away in my desk, next to the family photographs I had decided to keep not for nostalgia, but as a reminder of how much I had grown. That night, Eleanor called me to invite me to spend Christmas Eve with her family. Her granddaughter had insisted that I come, after hearing so much about me in recent months. You don't have to answer now, she told me, but I want you to know that here you have a family that chooses you, not one that feels obligated to tolerate you. After hanging up, I kept thinking about the phrase, a family that chooses you. For decades, I had believed that family was something you were born with, something you had to maintain no matter how they treated you. But Eleanor had shown me that family can also be something you build, with people who choose to value you not for what you can give them, but for who you are. At Luke 9 Giotoi on December 24th, while I was getting ready to go to Eleanor's house, my phone rang. It was Robert. Mom, I know things have been tense between us, but it's Christmas Eve. Don't you think we should... Should what, Robert? I don't know. Make amends. Start over. Starting over, does that imply you've reflected on how you've treated me? There was a long pause. Mom, I think we've both made mistakes. Stop, Robert. Stop right there. If your idea of starting over includes holding me responsible for the mistakes you have made, then you are not ready to start anything. But Mom, it's Christmas. Exactly. It's Christmas. And for the first time in years, I'm going to spend it with people who invited me because they want my company, not because they need my money. I hung up before he could respond. I put on my new cashmere scarf and walked out toward a Christmas Eve that promised to be different from all the previous ones. For the first time in decades, I was going to celebrate Christmas feeling like I truly had something to celebrate, my own liberation.